Hi, and thank you so much for joining us on this Facebook Live interview. My name is Ian Greenberg, and this is Mike Frigo, and we have the pleasure of interviewing our soloist tonight, Oliver Herbert. We are performing with the Britt Orchestra, Beethoven Symphony No. 6, the Pastoral, and Elgar's Cello Concerto in E minor. Now, there's a slight change as the conditions have worsened today, so we will be moving tonight's performance to North Medford High School, but the concert time will be the same, 8 p.m., and ticket holders will be seated, and there's plenty of seats for everyone to come and enjoy, so please join us at the high school tonight.
Great. And as you said, we're joined by Oliver Herbert. And Oliver, we're wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found your way to the stage at Britt Festival.
Sure, yeah. Hello, everybody watching there. And I am a cellist from San Francisco, California, originally. And actually, I grew up kind of in a musical family. Both my parents are musicians, and so it was something that I was kind of immersed in throughout my whole childhood, and eventually I found my way to the cello. I started playing when I was about 7 years old, and as I got into my teenage years, it became something that I was just totally in love with, and so I went to go and study at the Colburn School and the Curtis Institute of Music, and now, having recently graduated from Curtis, I'm starting to travel around and perform, and it's kind of, so the Britt Festival is one stop on my summer schedule this year, and it's such a beautiful place to be, beautiful nature, really friendly people, so it's a thrill to be here.
And what kind of draws you to performing in front of an orchestra as opposed to, say, playing in a cello section?
Sure. Well, I think always the motivating factor for me was just my total love for this repertoire. And so for me, it's always been driven by these particular pieces of music that I've just loved so much. And actually, the Elgar Cello Concerto that we'll be playing tonight has always, for me, been one of those pieces that kind of captured my attention in a way that I just really wanted to participate. I wanted to dive into the score, study it, understand all that Elgar was putting into the music, and get into the composer's mind. And so I think when I loved coming from loving these pieces so much, it was just something that kind of evolved for me in this particular direction. But I also do love playing in the cello section, I must say, and I've gotten a lot of nice opportunities to do that. And so I think, music is always wonderful in different settings. Chamber music too is always a staple part of any musician's life, and so I also enjoy that. Yeah.
Well, you're a really incredibly beautiful player, and it's been a pleasure to hear you play in rehearsals. You all coming to tonight's performance are in for a real treat. He just has an incredibly rich, warm sound, and very fitting for the cello concerto.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was just curious about how you prepare for when you're performing a concerto with an orchestra. I also saw that you've done a lot of competitions and had good success with that. Do you have any routines the day of that you like to do, or what kind of how do you just prepare mentally and physically for doing a big concert like this?
Yeah, I think there's the mental preparation for me is really key. I do a lot of kind of visualization of the piece in general, and kind of, actually one of an amazing conductor, Michael Tilson Thomas, described to me once these pieces being like national parks. And so to kind of picture the piece as a whole and how you're going to navigate through it, how you're going to share the experience of the music, and kind of that just visualizing that and actually thinking about the moment where you will be playing. I think that's a big factor for me personally. Also, of course, it takes a lot of practice and dedication and time spent just making sure that you have a really strong foundation physically that ideally, when it comes time to perform, you're not really thinking about where the fingers are going. It should all kind of be something that's soaked into every part of your body. And then the last part, I think maybe the most important part, is actually the study away from the cello with the score, kind of understanding what's going on in every part of the orchestra at any given moment, because that kind of thing I find really informs the way I'll approach certain sections. If the flute's playing, maybe I'll try to complement that with a different sound, or understanding the way the different sections of the piece relate, the tempo, the speed of the music, and those relationships, so that especially in a piece like the Elgar, which is this one kind of big statement, the movements kind of flow one into another, and it demands a certain something that I'm always trying to understand more and more, is kind of how to lead the music through so that it's seamless, because there's so much variety, so many different characters in the music, but at the end of the day it has to be this one big statement where the audience feels like, wow, I can, once you get to the end, I can see all the way where I've come from. And so it has to be just a total total understanding, ideally, of all those things.
Wonderful. Well, you're obviously a very accomplished cellist yourself, but I've got to know, who are your musical heroes? And like, when you were growing up, who really inspired you?
Yeah, well, I think I've always been very inspired by my peers at various points of my life, and they're always changing, and I'm always making new friends. And I think I'm of course I mentioned Michael Tilson Thomas was a big inspiration for me, because growing up in San Francisco, he was the music director of the San Francisco Symphony, and so I would, my parents playing in the orchestra, I would always sit in rehearsals and just as a toddler, like, watch these long rehearsals. And so I had a lot of kind of subconscious, I think, influence from those experiences with that orchestra. And I'll say, cellists, of course, I think every cellist these days it's just amazing to see what somebody like Yo-Yo Ma does, and kind of how his whole kind of approach to sharing his humanity with others, the attention he gives to everything, and that's very inspiring. But yeah, like I said, I think for me it's just always, I'm constantly inspired by the people that I'm playing with, the people that I meet, my friends. This orchestra is phenomenal, and also working with Teddy this week has been very inspiring. I think has a great musical soul and a lot of energy, and that's something. Try to draw things from everybody that I'm working with, and I think that's kind of the fun thing about playing, traveling around and playing in different places, because it's never the same. I always come. It's like I meet 50% with me and my personality, but the other, it's like a conversation in that way.
Well, it's interesting that you and Teddy, our conductor, both have in common kind of being inspired by MTT in San Francisco, and having that tie together is pretty cool.
Yeah, and Teddy and I, we actually, we have a lot in common in that way, both growing up in the Bay Area when we played in the San Francisco Symphony Youth Orchestra, but at different times, and we never actually met each other while we were in San Francisco. Funnily enough, we met just a few months ago. We played a program on the radio in New York and WQXR, but before that we hadn't actually met, but he was always somebody that I heard a lot of things about, and so it was very, very cool to finally get to work together.
Well, as I've already mentioned, you have such a beautiful sound, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the cello that you're playing on, and its history, and your relationship with it when you started using it, and how long you've been playing
absolutely. It's a beautiful cello from 1769, made by Guadagnini, who's a great instrument maker of that time period in Italy. And actually, I'm so fortunate to play on this instrument. It's loaned to me by a man named Damir Yanigro, who He lives in Cleveland, and he's a neuroscientist, but actually his father was a really famous cellist, Antonio Janigro, who's an Italian-Croatian cellist of the 20th century. He was the director of the Zagreb Soloists and had a really prolific career and major influence in the music world of that time. And so the cello has this kind of lineage that I think every time I pick it up, and especially when I'm learning a new piece, I always feel like it knows the piece better than I do. And that's it's a very humbling feeling when I approach something new, and I know that this cello has played those notes. Or I could go on Spotify or YouTube and listen to this cello being played with the Chicago Symphony or something like that. I mean, it's a really cool thing. So I'm very, very thrilled to have it. I've been playing on it for about 1.5 years at this point, and it's been a really nice partnership. I always feel like the instruments, in a way, they start to change, as I'm sure both of you know. When you play on them a lot, they kind of morph to your way of playing, but at the same time, they have such strong personalities. And I think especially these older instruments, for me, whenever I'm playing a cello like this, it's like it really also changes the way I approach the instrument too, because it has a particular way that it likes to be played. And I think so. That's another way of meeting in the middle. It's between the player and the instrument. It's always an ongoing conversation as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you have any projects that you're excited about upcoming?
Yeah. Well, I actually just recorded my first CD, and so that's something that we're working on, and I'll have more information about that in the next months. But that's something that I'm very excited about, and that was a really cool thing to embark on that journey, recording something, and the intensity of that experience. And I think I'm very proud of the direction that it's heading. So that's something that will be announced in the near future. And then other than that, I have a few collaborations that I'm really excited about. One in particular is that I'm playing a concert week with the San Francisco Symphony in the last weekend of September with Michael Tilson Thomas, who I was talking about before, and it's actually his last season as music director of the symphony, and so it's a real honor for me to be there. We'll be playing Haydn's D major cello concerto, which is actually not programmed very much, and so it's kind of exciting to play that piece, and it'll be on September 26th, 27th, and 28th. So those are kind of what immediately comes to mind.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And just kind of a silly question, but what do you like to do outside of when you're performing and practicing and your musical life? Do you have hobbies outside?
I do. I think these days a big hobby of mine, it sounds kind of stupid in a way, but I like to just walk around and basically explore the places that I'm traveling. And I don't have any particular objective, but well, for instance, today I heard there's a farmer's market, so I'll probably check that out. But I find that just the kind of, I've always loved walking, and growing up in San Francisco, I was walking everywhere. It's in my neighborhood in particular has a lot of hills, and so I think it's a time for me to kind of, my brain to slow down, and it almost feels like a meditation, I think, for me. It's when I can kind of have some calm. But other than that, I don't have like too many distinctive hobbies that I could say, nothing that interesting. So
that's good though.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you.
And we can't wait for tonight's performance. It's really been a pleasure rehearsing Elgar with you this week.
Thanks.
And really looking forward to tonight's performance. So
likewise.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, please remember that tonight's concert is at North Medford High School at 8 p.m. And we look forward to seeing you all there. Thanks so much.